Okay, so this is my second video for the book The Second Founding. This one is for chapter 2, which is titled Toward Equality, the 14th Amendment. Okay, so first I'm gonna do the same I did for the first chapter, which go a little bit like over my notes. And then like connected to the historical narratives and main conflicts. So the people, I wrote about Andrew Johnson, which he was the U.S. president after Lincoln opposed radical Reconstruction and vetoed key civil rights measures, worsening tensions with Congress. Then we talked about, not talked about, then I saw a lot about Charles Sumner, which he's a radical Republican senator who pushed for full racial equality and opposed moderate compromises in the amendments. Then there was Thaddeus Stevens, who he was a radical Republican leader who viewed Reconstruction as a chance to remake Southern society and secure Black rights. And then we talked about Lyman Truebill, John Bingham, Senator Jacob Howard, moderate Republicans, which these Republicans favored practical reform over radical equality, wanted to unite the parties to override Johnson's vetoes. Okay, so when it comes to places and events, I also wrote a lot about them. For example, I wrote about the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which was the first U.S. law to define citizenship and guarantee equal rights, directly countering the Dred Scott decision. There was also the Joint Committee of Reconstruction, which is a congressional body that drafted and debated the language of the 14th Amendment. Then I have the ratification of the 14th Amendment of 1868, which is the final approval extended citizenship and equal protection through Southern resistance and delayed implementation. The Reconstruction Act of 1867, post-war South of 1865 to 1868, elections of 1866, and yeah. And then I also want to talk about the ideas and technologies that come out of the chapter, which I think a really important one is the birthright citizenship, since it's the principle that anyone born in the U.S., except indigenous people and those under foreign jurisdiction, is a citizen. There's also the Equal Protection Clause, which talks about constitutional guarantee that states must treat all persons equally under the law, and the foundation for later civil cases. The Privilege or Immunity Clause, Due Process Clause, Incorporation Decline, Radical versus Moderate Republican divide, which is the fundamental ideological split over how far Reconstruction should go in transforming American society. And there's also the gender language, which I think I noticed mainly in this chapter talks a lot about several ideas and technologies. And then some conflicts I wrote about is the Congress versus President Johnson, which is central political struggle over who controlled Reconstruction policy. There was also the radical versus moderate Republicans, federal power versus states' rights, same as in chapter 1. Legal versus social equality, racial justice versus gender equality, judicial versus legislative power. Okay, now I'm gonna go more into the purpose and conflict of historical narrative. So the main conflict is that the 14th Amendment sought to resolve the contradictions of freedom and citizenship left unresolved by the 13th Amendment. It was basically designed to make equality a national principle, but the debates over its language, enforcement, and interpretation revealed how deeply divided the nation remained over who was counted as a citizen and who was not counted as a citizen. Then the connection to historical narrative, I think, is seen of how Foner uses this chapter to basically show that the 14th Amendment was the constitutional cornerstone of the Second founding, redefining the relationship between citizens, states, and the federal government. It directly overturned the Dred Scott ruling and established birthright citizenship and equal protection under the law, but it also exposed the limits of Reconstruction and divided political will, resistance for the South, and um, a justiciary kind of like they were unwilling to uphold the amendments promise of radical promise of equality and freedom. And yeah,